Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Anime Movie Podcast. We are your host. I'm Joe Welke.
I'm Kat Hamilton.
And today we're talking about a 2019 movie called Promare. It was directed by Hiroyuki Imaishi from his, it's the debut film from his Studio Trigger. Studio Trigger did a couple of anime series before, one of which I've watched, but other ones I have not.
Oh, which one did you watch?
Kill la Kill. It's
okay.
Very goofy, very insane.
That's available on Netflix, isn't it?
Yes. I think it's subtitled on Netflix only, but I watched it, was very enjoyable, and now we're here with Promare, which we will fuck up because we've been pronouncing it Promare for the longest time, and it's just ingrained in our heads.
You know, I was looking on, that's totally my fault because I was the one who called it Promare, because the way most Japanese works is that there's usually a consonant and then a vowel, and you pronounce each of them separately. So Promare would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not a Japanese word at all. And I was looking on the Wikipedia because there's this thing called Hepburn, which is the romanization of Japanese words. So they kind of write it out phonetically. And the way it's written out phonetically is Promare.
Yeah, I saw that on the IMDb page. They say they have Promare, whatever you just said.
Promare.
Yeah.
And neither of those things is Promare.
Yeah, no.
So Promare. Get it into my head.
Promare. So yeah, this movie is really wild. It is wild. I described it to Kat as an assault on your senses.
It's a sensory journey.
It is visually insane. It is loud as fuck. We were watching it and I was like, I'm so glad that we're not watching this in a movie theater because it would just blow my eardrums out. Everything, it's like a mecha type movie where there's this futuristic firefighting group and they're trying to extinguish the fires that were created by this race of people called the Burnish, who are mutants that are able to that have access to like fire powers. So the people of Promepolis, why not Promopolis? As soon as they said Promepolis, I was like, why not Promopolis? It was right there for you.
There's a ton of Greek mythology references in this, and I think it's based on Prometheus, which is why they're doing
that alien movie. With Michael Fassbender. Yeah.
Oh, you know it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, interestingly, Prometheus was it's possibly thought to mean forethought, which kind of reminds me of the Governor Cray Forsyth's last name. And he's also the dude that gave fire to the people.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So he went against the gods.
Prometheus was?
Yeah, he went against the gods to give the knowledge of fire to humans. So
okay. Wow, foreshadowing in the name of the fucking city.
Yeah. And in Promare generally as the name.
Yeah. So we follow this firefighting team in their mecha suits, and boy, is it just loud. Like the fires that are happening are like, then the mechas are like, and everybody's screaming throughout the entire movie. It's so loud.
It is really loud, and there was kind of a nice moment. The first moment it gets quiet, you just kind of relax. And you're like, oh, I can chill for a second. Because this definitely has that action movie thing where it starts out with action. And but this does a much better job of characterizing and introducing you to characters while the action is happening. Because they kept doing these kind of like freeze frames when a new character is introduced and it actually has like a lower third with their name on it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really nice, because we've complained about some films in the past where you spend the first 15 minutes in an action scene, you're like, I don't know who anyone is.
Yeah. I mean, I know that, Redline did it like in the middle of the movie. But this is the first scene. It's like, oh, here are your heroes. Galo, Varys, Remy, Ignis, Lucia. Look down to look at all of these names. And I forget the other lady.
Ina?
Ina, yes. I didn't write her down because we were like making fun of something and we missed it.
And they did that throughout the entire film too. When a new person was introduced, they kind of did that. And I thought that was nice because there were a lot of characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were. And they had their own little like pose freeze frame thing with like their name in the background. They have the name at the bottom. It's like if you missed their name, you must have been joking about something, which I was. Ina.
I guess it's technically like the second scene because the first scene is this kind of introduction to this event that happened 30 years ago that was cataclysmic and led to half of the world population being wiped out and the sudden human combustion of people in these deeply troubling situations where they got really angry or needed to protect themselves. And then they suddenly were like spewing this fire, which doesn't actually look like fire. It's these like really beautiful light lavender and turquoise colors that just remind you of like the album cover of Synthwave. And I really liked the color schemes of this, but then it's very, very geometrical the way that they render some of this stuff, and almost looks like tissue paper over tissue paper. You know, this has so much kind of implied sparkle or this kind of flare, and yet so much of it's very matte in color. It reminded me of Hosoda animation, especially in Summer Wars when we're like in Oz because of that like heavy CGI feel for a lot of it. But then, you know, the eyes had like a ton of sparkle in them. But even the lights, they didn't look like light. It looked like just, I don't know how to describe it. Just like, paper, like paper crossing paper bands. And it's sort of this implied light, but it's this very, very stylized animation.
Even when it is like kind of matte looking, kind of like Hosoda, the colors everywhere are so bright that it's like, oh, I don't notice that this is necessarily matte, or they have different outlining. Like it's not outlined in black a lot of times. It'll be like outlined, like the main character's hair is blue. I feel like the outline would be like lime green or something at some points, or navy blue at some points. And it's just like, okay, this is very visually interesting, if not overwhelming at points. Because some of these like mecha battles, it's hard to tell what's going on, I feel like. And you get lost in like, who's who. It was kind of like, have you seen any of the Transformers movies?
Yeah.
When they're fighting, like it's just gears all over the place. And you're like, who is who? Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? And you can kind of get lost in it. But then after like a second or two, you're like, okay, they separated. Now we know, okay, we're back to, I know who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. They did a good job also as like the people that were colored darkly were like their mecha was black or something. Like those are the bad guys, obviously. Or are they? Oh, and the good guys were like in white and blah, blah, blah. So it was very CG heavy, but I felt like it worked. Like a lot of times when we see CG in these, it like doesn't look like the characters are a part of the CG world or something, or it looks like they're over top of it.
I definitely thought there were moments where it did badly.
Really?
There were just moments where the way the sort of like camera quote unquote moved made me feel a bit sick. And there were times when I was just like, oh, that was a little heavy handed for me, you know, or like I kind of winced like looking at the screen. But I think that, obviously the entire thing is CG, and so it would have bothered me the entire time if it was done badly all the time. There were just certain moments where I felt a little bit lost or seasick.
I could see that. I thought that the CG worked well with like the characters in the world. I thought that it was a good blend. It wasn't so obvious all of the time. Like there were obviously like some moments, but I agree with you with like the fluidity and the fast pace and movements of the camera did get me dizzy sometimes. And like if you are like prone to seizures, I would not recommend this movie at all. Do not watch this movie if you are. Like it is intense.
Yeah, and there were some stylized moments where the action was really choppy during some of these fight scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes the fluidity of these CGI movements that kind of really swing around mixed with the choppiness was a bit weird for me.
Yeah. Yeah, Dance Gavin Dance has a music video for their song One in a Million that it was like similarly choppy and similarly CG, and I was like, ooh, it doesn't look good there because everything was moving kind of slow.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it just didn't bother me as much because everything was moving so fast. I didn't have a chance to think about how bad it was. I was too busy trying to parse out who's the good guy and who's the bad guy.
And there's some really great moments where in these fight scenes where they use some of the music, especially like the vocals of the music, start out seeming like they're part of the scene, and then you realize, oh no, that's coming from the music. Where somebody gets thrown off of a building, and you think that it's kind of like they're like ah, and then you realize like, oh no, it's like a ah,
Yeah.
and it kind of becomes the song. And I thought those moments were really great.
I feel like there's also music throughout this movie, like constant, like
Yeah.
and vocal music too.
I mean, it's 112 minutes of movie, and it's an hour and 15 of music. Like the soundtrack is an hour and 15 minutes long. So that means there's like half an hour that might be missing their main songs.
I did notice it did feel like, so a point that I brought up during watching this was that it felt like it was meant to be a series, and I was like breaking up which episodes would end. And you know how like at the end of episodes of series they'll play a song to like take you out and then roll credits?
Yeah.
I felt like it was anytime a song would come on, it was like that. And it felt like the end of an episode of an anime. But like I feel like this was just, I know it's their first movie with Studio Trigger, but it felt like to me a series that was just like smashed together. Like they couldn't make a series out of it because like the episodes wouldn't be long enough or something. So they're like, I mean, if we push it all together, it'll be as long enough to be a movie, right? Almost 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a mini series at best.
Mm-hmm.
You can maybe get 6 episodes out of it, and I don't know if that would be worth it. And I agreed with you that it had that sort of episodic feel for sure, but I didn't think it didn't work as a film.
Oh, I'm not saying it doesn't work as a film, but I think it seemed episodic. Like this is when this episode would end if this was a series. This is when this episode would end.
I guess it's almost like it got like a 6-act structure instead of a 3-act structure.
Okay, yeah. I agree.
But overall, what do you think of the soundtrack?
I thought it was all right. It had some bangers on there. I just kept getting distracted because I'm trained from watching anime to know that like when that song comes up, that's the end of the movie, or like there's a transition. Like in Your Name, they have their fucking Radwimps or whatever, right? That was who was in it. And anytime that one of their songs would happen, it was like a transition or a montage to something new. And then like when the song was over, we were in a new place. And in series, it's the end of the episode. So whenever, I would say that they probably had like 6 songs in this where I was like, oh, okay, well, this is like the end of this.
You mean
arc.
lyric ups?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was feeling with it. But like the songs aren't bad and the soundtrack isn't bad. But I was getting a little distracted because of
that Vox.
how I've been watching anime for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
I didn't think the Vox was distracting. This is one of those few films that I watch and I'm like, wow, I would listen to this soundtrack.
Oh yeah, I'd listen to the soundtrack.
I would for sure. I'm going to go look it up on Spotify after this and play it while I edit stuff. So yeah, I liked it. And again, I loved the way they used those moments where you think you're in scene and then it's actually part of the song.
Mm-hmm.
And it does it so smoothly. It's just like beautifully edited with that. So yeah, I loved that. And I liked how they kept coming back to kind of the sort of main song, the theme, and they had a couple of different variations on it. You know, it's so cohesive, and it's kind of unusual in animes as far as I know, but they do have it on, especially like sort of epic movies.
Yeah. Yeah. That could also be a reason why I would think it was like a series too, because it had like a theme song going throughout the movie.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, if you watch Lord of the Rings, there's a couple of songs in there that they do different variations on. And, they play the Hobbit theme a lot, and that kind of, you'd think would kind of draw a cohesive string throughout. But for you, it felt like it broke it up.
Yeah. It felt like it was the end of an episode.
Right.
Yeah. Got some heavy hitters of anime voice acting in here.
Oh, yes.
Got Crispin Freeman as the voice of Cray Forsyth. Cray? I keep wanting to call him Clay, but it's Cray. Billy, I think his name is Zemet, who is the voice of our kind of main hero, Galo. He voices Josuke Higashikata from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The main quote-unquote villain, Leo, is voiced by Johnny Young Bosch, who is Lelouch from Code Geass, and I forget his name, but the main character from Trigun. So heavy hitters here.
I mean, the Spike Spiegel.
Oh yeah,
guy,
Steve
right?
Bloom is in it as well. Yeah, man. So this is an anime movie.
Yeah, and all of the names of the characters are all like different Greek gods or Greek references. The last name of Ina and Ellis, what was it again?
Ardabit or something?
Yeah, and it means to burn.
No.
And I think that, Gallo Thymos. I mean, Thymos means spirit. He's very high-spirited.
Yeah, he is. He's got these burning eternal soul of a firefighter or whatever it is.
And Vulcan, Hephaestus, both of those names are either Greek or Roman gods of fire. Vulcan, volcano, that sort of thing. What else is there? I think Leo...
Varus, Ignis,
Ignite, obviously. And I think Leo... Was it Leo Rota?
Oh, I'm not quite sure. I didn't.
His last
I
name?
remember as Leo.
But again, it's let me look at that one up really quickly, because there were so many of them. Dun 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 dun.
Yeah, I don't even know how to stall for you here.
I will cut this out. Do 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 do. Oh, Leo Fotia. Yeah, okay. Leo Fotia's last name means fire.
Yeah, there we go.
So yeah, everybody's name means fire or to burn, or it's a reference to Greek gods. Or, I mean, and Deus Ex Machina, which is the name of a big machine that we see at some point, that is a Latin phrase, but it comes from Greek plays. So all of it is like very much referencing stuff in Greek mythology and Greek history.
Yep. So I think we've got a good handle on the non-spoilers. Did we do a synopsis? Kind of, we did that at the beginning, right?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, thank God. Shall we get into the Spoilerville?
Yeah, let's do it.
They wouldn't spoil this, right?
Oh,
You
God.
can't spoil this,
Please
right?
don't spoil
Spoiler talk, spoiler talk, anime movie podcast, spoiler talk.
Did you see the sort of twist coming with this sort of gray area of ethos about this place? Like, I wasn't expecting this dystopian police state thing and this sort of like government conspiracy stuff to start come up.
Yeah, I kind of saw Cray Forsyth being a douche coming, but I didn't see all of the twists that were about to happen. Like, there's so many twists in this, like, and I knew that the Burnish people were kind of ostracized and vilified in society, but I didn't know that the twist of them, like, no, obviously, like, we're all human beings or whatever, and they aren't evil. But like some of the Burnish's motives, I'm like, I have to question too.
Sure.
but also like Cray Forsyth, like I could see where he was also coming from at certain points, and like the people that want to do away with the burnish, I could understand why, because 30 years ago they extinguished half of the world or whatever. It's like, or exterminated
Extinguished.
half.
Ironic.
True. But yeah, it's like if you had a fucking bunch of group of people that did that, like it'd be hard to for people to move on and like accept you back into society, you know?
Yeah, it definitely would be. There was something about the beginning of this, the sort of origin story of the burnish and the way it played out that kind of reminded me of the Avengers, or it felt kind of Marvel, where you see these people in these everyday situations in these different places. There's a guy stuck in traffic in San Francisco. There's a pregnant woman fighting with her husband in Paris, and there's a guy stuck in commuting on the subway who just gets his foot stepped on and stuff by a stiletto heel in Tokyo. And then you see them kind of like lose it. And it's this sort of magical realism, this like fantasy of like if something got so bad or you were so frustrated that you could just explode with flames and suddenly like have powers. And it's this kind of like fantasy when you're kind of out of control, or the situation is out of your control. And I found that kind of interesting. And then you kind of find out like, and now half of the population is wiped out. It's like, whoa, that escalated very quickly.
Yeah.
It went from like everyday people to like, oh no, these people become monsters. And then it very quickly turns it back around and says, no, these people actually aren't monsters. They're dealing with some demons. But as soon as you see like the head of the Freeze Force, what is his name? Oh, that's Vulcan, right? Yeah. As soon as he shows up and it's like, oh, he's got scary pointy teeth.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as he landed, I was like, oh, they're definitely good guys. You can tell by the very pointy teeth and his aggressive nature. Like they're not trying to hide the fact that this police force is actually kind of evil.
Yeah.
And then you get the people in the middle as the burning rescue, is that what they call it?
Yeah, burning rescue.
Which Gallo is a part of, and the rest of our main characters.
Well, I also couldn't really understand if they were a like government affiliated firefighting team, because I feel like at a certain point in Vulcan's like, this isn't, you're not supposed to be here or whatever. It seemed like they were their own private firefighting agency.
I wonder if it kind of felt like FBI versus police.
Yeah, it could be. Or even like firefighters with police or something. Because
they go in like, there's a lot of like legal jargon where they're like, well, that's only okay if there's an emergency. And then, on the other side, Vulcan's like, yeah, but who gets to determine whether it's an emergency? It's like, well, we have the right to do it. And I was like, I feel like I'm in a mock
City
trial.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like a lot of bureaucracy in this as well.
Bureaucracy is tight.
Yeah. But yeah, there is a lot of twists. Like, and obviously when Vulcan shows up and he like slams Gallows or like chokes him out or something, you're like, okay, well, that's not a good dude. Okay. We understand that guy's bad. But, yeah, and it turns out, maybe the Burnish are just misunderstood, but they're labeled as like a terrorist organization, and they are still setting fires across the thing. And it's hard to like be sympathetic. Like, I know that they're I guess, possessed by some kind of interdimensional fire people, which is like a reveal. This is when shit started to like get weird for me. when all of that stuff, which we'll get to, when all of that started to get explained, I was like, what the fuck is going on here? But just because like their thing is like, we never kill people, but you're still like destroying the world. And they're like, we always give people an escape route. It's like, yeah, a lot of those people probably don't recognize that because they're like freaking out,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of explained later that whatever these creatures are that they have a connection with and are using to create these sort of pyrotechnics, they have a desire to burn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the sort of agency of that creature. And so then the host of that creature or of that power also has this desire to burn things and has to kind of suppress that.
Yeah.
And of course, 30 years ago when it first started happening, nobody knew how to suppress it. Nobody knew anything about it. And they were all enraged at the moment that it kind of transpired. And so they just start burning the shit out of the world. But I think the idea is that later they're being persecuted, but plenty of them have it totally under control.
Yeah. Like one of the first examples that we see of that is like a guy that works at a pizza place who's just, minding his own business. And then Vulcan comes storming in and he's like, that guy's a fucking burnish. And the pizza shop owner's like, no, he's a good guy. Like he's just working. He's just doing pizza. And he's like, he's a burnish and you're harboring a burnish. You're both going to jail. It's like, wow. This escalated quickly. Yeah,
so it ends up kind of touching into these political ideas of these police states, and you get this feeling of the witch hunt of the Red Scare, and also of Nazi Germany and Jews and harboring Jews and
the Japanese in America.
Yeah,
after Pearl Harbor,
absolutely. Being literally pulled from their shops and put into internment camps and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of this kind of interesting historical callback where it's not directly reflecting any one of those particular events, but very much feels familiar as like, oh yeah, this has happened in history.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It will happen again too. Probably God. It's gonna. I mean, even after 9/11, like it wasn't to the point of like they were being jailed or, well, actually they were, with like, Muslim people or like people from the Middle East. Like they were just getting, anytime you got on a plane, it was like, oh, fucking, there's a guy here. And you're just like, oh.
The way you explained that was so vague.
Yeah, it was very vague.
There's a guy here.
There's a guy here. And I'm like, whoa. But you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah, I think that there is a really odd turn of events. It almost kind of motivates it. But when you get the frozen lake where Gallo goes to cool his head whenever he's being particularly boy feelings about everything.
Whenever he's like,
yeah, like that.
I got to ride. Get on my motorcycle, get out of here.
So we see this frozen lake, and then later, we have Leo Fatio and Gallo Timos, who have this kind of rivalry since Gallo was kind of the reason why Leo got put into jail, but then later starts to empathize and really understand where he's coming from, and tries to even help him when he comes across them and all the Burnish who have escaped from this frozen jail.
They're in exile, kind of.
Yeah. But they keep kind of butting heads and starting to like fight again. And there's this great moment where Ina has them in the plane and they're starting to fight again. And she's just like opens the bay doors and it's just like, fuck off and work out your boy issues.
Here's your fucking frozen creek. You have fun down there.
See if you can cool down. But they're both running so hot, and Leo literally has like the fire of the burnish that it melts this frozen lake. And at the bottom of it, there's this giant lab, which does have this sort of like Deus Ex Machina feeling to it, and then of course leads to the actual mecha called Deus Ex Machina.
It's a Deus Ex Machina, also exposition dump.
Yeah.
Also, what the fuck?
But it kind of breaks the fourth wall a little bit and becomes kind of self-aware during that time though, because there's this moment where Ina's like, what would you do if these guys hadn't shown up? You are a scientist who came up with all of this technology that's being used now. And then you were killed and you've uploaded your consciousness into this thing, but you had no way, you had no vessel, no people to be able to carry out your wishes. Like, what would you have done if these guys hadn't come by? And he was like, nothing.
Yeah,
we would have been fucked.
Well, then Cray would have fucking destroyed the world.
And it's just like, oh, so why these guys? Are they chosen ones? And he's like, nope, they showed up.
Because Galo asked him, he was like, why us? He's like, because you are the only people that showed up.
And I thought that was great. I loved
Yeah.
that moment. And there was another moment like that I know you wrote down. And I think it was when Deus Ex Machina with Leo and Gallo are fighting against the sort of mecha that Cray has created.
Yeah, and he names it something like Crayface or Crazon X or something. And he's like, and this is our combined thing, Leo DeGallon. And then Cray is like, stop making up stupid names for everything. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. Because I thought that exact same thing. And he's like, now it's Gallon de Leo or something. And it's like, just...
Yeah, and like a moment before that, they'd like just named a weapon and given a name for a move, and again like lower third freeze frame, and you kind of rolled your eyes and you're like, oh my god,
Yeah.
like there's too much of this. And then Cray says that line, and
Yeah.
you lost it because I think it was exactly what you were thinking at the time.
It was really funny. That was a great scene.
Yeah,
But like, I was having a hard time, like, because this movie is funny at certain points.
yeah,
It is not serious, but then very serious at other points. And it's just like this. It's as frenetic as the animation. Like the tone and pace is just like relentless.
yeah. It does feel a little bit like just kind of being slapped up a bit. You know, not to the point where you're being punched, but just like slap, 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 slap. And you're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, but for 2 hours, it's just like pop, 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 and then there's only like, oh, are you done? No, pop, 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 pop. Here's a guy that uploaded his consciousness to a computer. Pop, 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 pop. There's Ex Machina. Pop, 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 pop.
Oh, I forgot to mention the square flares.
Oh, we did forget to mention the square flares.
And we haven't even mentioned like Cray's plan,
Yeah.
what his foresight is about.
Well, we're still podcasting. It's not over.
I know.
What should we tackle first then?
Well,
Yeah, hold on. Before we do this, I wanted to mention that a lot of this too reminded me of The Incredibles.
okay.
The like the beginning thing where they explain on the history of everything, that's kind of something that happens in The Incredibles, where they talk about like why supers are illegal, quote unquote illegal at that point, and like the history of like they kept getting sued or blah blah blah. And then even some of the animation, that when it wasn't CG, like during the credits, it was similar to some of the animation that's in this, I feel like too.
I think that sort of silhouetted paper cutout feel is something that definitely The Incredibles
Yeah.
uses.
Yeah. And even Cray kind of reminds me of Mr. Incredible, like the way that he's drawn
Sure.
kind of looks like him.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that's most unusual about the animation in this is just the sheer number of geometrical shapes.
Dude, it's unreal, the animation in this movie. It's so crazy.
Yeah. And every time we saw the square sun flare, we just started going square flare.
Square flares. But then, once everything is kind of solved, circle flares. Like
Circle
normal.
flares.
Why would that happen?
I guess the
Harmony.
flames kind of look like either triangles or squares that are kind of dancing over each other. So maybe it has something to do with saving the world from the Promare.
Yeah.
And then, yeah,
Okay.
the shapes change.
Let's talk about Parnassus.
Let's do it.
This is Cray's plan to leave Earth because he's of the mindset that the Earth is going to destroy itself anyway. There's too much heat building in the Earth's core and it's going to destroy the world. So they need to take this gigantic ship that can only house 10,000 people, I believe.
An ark, if
An
you will.
ark, yeah. They even said an ark
Like
in the
Noah's
movie.
Ark, yeah.
I think it's 10,000, right?
10,000.
And they're going to take it to a new planet that, I had it written down. Oh, I guess I didn't have it written down. But they're going to a new planet to populate and terraform and all that stuff. And he's going to... the way that the Parnassus is powered is through the Burnish's power. He needs to capture and imprison them and then spin them really fast on a wheel that pisses them off so much that their fire powers just ignite even without not at will. What's the opposite of at will? Instinctually, I guess.
Sure. Subconsciously.
Yeah. So he's rounding up the Burnish and just capturing them and putting them in this like hyper intense like facility prison thing and having them on their spinning wheels. And in order to get this like wormhole type thing, he needs their power in order to make that happen.
Some kind of a warp window.
Yeah, I think
into another universe.
He's trying to create a warp engine with what's the lady's name? Ina's sister,
Ellis.
And she's a scientist and she's creating the warp engine, and it tears a fabric in the time-space continuum once he gets all of these people to spin as much as possible. And he needs to get like a bunch of Burnish people in order to fit the Parnassus and get it to go through the wormhole into this new planet that he has deemed habitable.
And that's part of the reason why they're going around and trying to find more of these people, not because they're a harm anymore to society, but because they are the fuel for this engine.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, like I said earlier, like you could see why Cray and people of this world would be fearful, and I guess like you could see why they would vilify the Burnish because they have burned like half of the earth not too long ago. And so Cray's worried that the Earth's core is going to overheat and it's going to destroy it within a matter of time. But then we find out that the use of this engine that he's created using the Burnish's powers will further ignite the Earth's core and make it blow up even faster.
Yeah, and he's aware of that. And he's not making any attempt to save the Earth's core. He's more interested in this fix that would cause the death of all of these Burnish people. And this sort of eugenics idea where you pick 10,000 of the elite. You know, you get to choose which of humanity survives, and you take them off to terraform on this other planet and let the rest of the world burn.
Yeah.
So, of course, there's like an ethos here that you almost go like, well, is this for the greater good? Does it mean that humanity will be able to continue and this is the only way to do it? Or has this guy gotten really messed up in this, like, oh, he hates the Burnish because it wiped out half of the world. How about wiping out the rest of it?
Right.
How does that make you okay?
Yeah. And like, I don't know how many people are left on the world, but it's, I don't think 10,000 is half. I mean, you'd be killing way more than half.
Let's see, there's almost 7 billion people.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
So 10,000 out of 3.5 billion people.
Yeah. Adios. You're the chosen.
Jesus.
He can't save you either.
So I think this brought up some really interesting ideas about the gray areas of morality and the complications of ethics.
Yeah, I was going to say for like I would say kind of silly, stupid action movie, there is a lot of like, well, who is the right person here? Like, because you see Leo's side, you see Galo's side, you see Cray's side, like even, and I think that's what they say. What makes a great villain is that you can see their side, and every villain is the hero of their own story. Like the worst villains are the villains that are just like evil for the sake of being evil.
And that's kind of how Vulcan felt.
Yes.
He felt like evil for the sake of evil, but Cray felt smart and like he did have foresight. You know, he was making these plans and
he did have foresight.
Said it on purpose. And you know, Parnassus again is a Greek mythological place that was where the muses were supposed to be, and in any kind of literature, it's supposed to represent music and art and literature, because that's the place where you know, the sort of things that would inspire the great poets you know, lived on this mountain. And I'm not quite sure how that relates to what Parnassus is.
That's what I was about to say. I was like, that one felt kind of shoehorned.
Yeah. I think they could have picked something else.
Yeah. What would you have picked?
Just call it Prometheus.
Okay, and then we'll get this is a sequel to Ridley Scott's
No.
Prometheus, Alien Covenant.
But it'd be kind of nice since Prometheus is sometimes translated as forethought and it's Cray Foresight's thing. I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah,
That's kind of fun,
kind of fun, right?
in like a meaning way. I would have liked that. There's probably some other ones too that you could have done other gods and things.
Yeah, probably. Whoever's the god of travel or whatever.
Or like sort of like the goddess of hunting.
Because they're hunting for a new planet.
Hunting for a new planet, and they've also kind of like hunted for this prey that is the fuel for this engine, which are the Burnish people.
Oh, call it the Apollo.
The Apollo, sure.
That's what we do.
Yeah, I mean they did put some thought into every single character's name.
Yeah,
as like in order to give it some kind of meaning. So you can't bash it that much.
And there is also an interesting thing with Cray and Gallo, because it turns out that Cray is like a secret Burnish. Like he is a Burnish, but he suppressed his Burnish stuff so much that no one even suspects it.
Yeah.
But he was the cause of an accident because he couldn't suppress it when he first got these Burnish powers that burned down a home. And Gallo was a person that he quote unquote saved, but he was just able to escape the place and he didn't actually save him. And that was just kind of like a fictitious story that was made up because people saw Cray holding Gallo and then they were like, oh, this guy's a hero. And he used that story to like propel him into politics and get his Parnassus, plan to take shape. And Gallo had always looked at this guy as like a hero to him. And he's like, this guy is like the shining person of society. And turns out he's one of the Burnish. He's one of the people that he hates. So what would happen if he got to this other planet and he is the Burnish?
He's the only Burnish?
He's the only Burnish.
He might use that to kind of have an advantage and keep his power
I was
there.
going to say dictatorial rule.
Yeah. Which he was basically doing before anyway.
Well, it was more like manipulation, I feel like. Like he was a massive like manipulator, persuader, like, oh, the Burnish are bad people and this is why. And I mean, he's got a pretty solid case, like they burned half the earth. But then that's when people start not treating them like people anymore.
And that definitely has some X-Men feels to it.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And the how the politics comes into it, and which I kind of enjoy as a way of writing a story, just because it has that magical realism and you just imagine the sort of problems that would come up in this situation if it was put into the way the world works and the way politics works. And I find that fascinating, and I think it's a great way to tell a story.
And they do refer to the Burnish as mutants too.
That's true. Yeah, they do.
They get persecuted. Yeah, this might be the greatest movie ever made.
That's what you said in the first 5 minutes of it.
Yeah, when they were giving the explanation, the backstory segment of the movie, like the first 5 minutes, I was like, this is the greatest movie ever made. I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, this movie can be a lot to look at, but it's thoughtful on some levels. 'Cause if you like that sort of Marvel, X-Men, Avengers kind of, thinking piece where they actually have thought a bit about the thematics of it, but also action and badassery.
Yeah, and I
big
mean,
machines.
Even The Incredibles too. Like,
yeah,
that's a great superhero movie. Like, this is a superhero movie without superhero. Well, I guess they're superheroes.
It's kind of like anti-heroes.
Yeah, and
is everybody in this an anti-hero?
That's what I was going to say. Like the lines are so blurred all over,
which is great.
Because Gallo doesn't know that he's like, he's the, I would say, lead of the film, and he doesn't know that what he's doing is wrong at certain times. But he's trying his best, he's following the rules and as he knows them. But then when he's presented with new evidence of like, oh, you're actually like hurting people, he's like, oh, well, I really need to fucking think about this.
Yes.
But then the people that he's hurting, the Burnish, with their leader Leo, is explaining to him like what's going on. It's very nuanced.
Yeah.
And then Cray Foresight even has some nuance to him where it's like, well, I mean, he wants to extinguish everyone on the earth. I keep saying extinguish and not exterminate. He wants to like leave everybody behind except for these 10,000 people of his choosing. But you also see like where he's coming from at certain points. So that's what I think makes this such an interesting and thoughtful and nuanced movie. And it does inspire discussion.
It absolutely does. You know, and another character that kind of falls into those categories is Ellis as well.
Yeah.
Because she expresses doubt about what's going on. And, you know, then you kind of get the motivations that she wants to save her sister. And doesn't want the ark to leave without her sister on it. And when she's like, wait, I don't think we should be doing this. And then, you know, Cray kind of comes around and is like, well, would you like your sister to survive? You know, do you really want to be the reason why all of humanity doesn't get saved? You know, this way we could save part of humanity. You have to think of it that way. And then she goes, oh, God, okay. Yeah, you're right. We are saving humanity.
Yeah, because Cray makes the argument that, like, going back to save her sister would put the 10,000 people on the Parnassus at risk. He's like, would you really risk the lives of these 10,000 for the life of one? Like, that's just, like, not a good deal.
Yeah, and brings up a lot of ethical questions, but you know, on the surface, like
the trolley scenario.
The trolley scenario,
from
yeah, but with 10,000 people on the trolley. But then it's really interesting how you layer these ethical situations on top of each other. You know, when you start out with 10,000 versus one person, you know, you kind of have to go with the 10,000. But then when you put on top of it, it's like, well, how many people are being killed in order for this to happen? How many Burnish are powering this engine? Is it 10,000 people as well? And then, you know, you have to weigh that in.
Well, then you also have to weigh in like the 10,000 people that are on there. They might have a one sister that's there left on Earth as well, just because like maybe she's not as, she wasn't judged to be like a good person by Cray. They're going to miss that person, you know?
And that those 10,000 people leaving the Earth are going to, you know, destroy the rest of the population of Earth.
Yeah.
So it's not really 10,000 against one. But you can see how, you know, a narcissist who's manipulative, you know, would pick that, you know, small fact and would manipulate this scientist. And, you know, I think that's very realistic too.
Yeah. Best movie ever made. Like I said, like it on the surface face level of this movie, it is bright colors, action, mecha smashing each other.
Yeah.
But there's just so many layers of thought put into it and nuance, which leads to like very interesting discussion, which we are having here on the Anime.
Yeah. Do you think for the number of characters they gave names to that we got enough time with those characters to have kind of motivated everybody having a name?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Like, I don't know anything about Remy or Lucia or even Varys necessarily. Like, they're a part of the Burning Rescue team, but they get names, they get their whole like little pose thing and their freeze frame. But they don't really do much. Like they have what they are. Like Lucia is the hacker girl, and Remy has glasses.
He must do science things.
Yeah, I don't know. He's like another mecha guy.
Yeah,
and Varys is another mecha guy
who with super strength.
And Ignis has a mustache.
Yeah, I felt like they kind of did okay in giving you an idea of what their character was supposed to be on an archetypical level, but I felt like I wanted to know more, especially when they start out giving you such a big introduction to each of these people. They give equal weight to every character in the beginning of this film that's on this burning rescue team. But you really kind of only get to see Ina a lot more, and it's partly because of the fact that her sister Ellis is a big part of making this machine run, as in Parnassus. And then she becomes like a 5-second love interest for
Yeah, that
Gallo.
was very weird.
That doesn't really go anywhere. And then, of course, we follow Gallo really closely. And I kind of enjoy the way that we're not really introduced to Leo. We're introduced to him as a villain, and he's like really scary looking. It's very Venom costume.
Symbiote.
And, so you're in the beginning, you kind of think like, oh, this whole team of superheroes, they're going to have equal weight for the rest of this film. It's like, absolutely not. And it's like, oh, this villain is just going to go away and not come back. And then he does come back and becomes a much bigger character. But I couldn't decide how much more I would have wanted to know about those other characters. I just think maybe they could have been involved a little more. Like maybe all of them could have gone to that lab.
Yeah.
Well,
they do have a part at the end where like they save Gallo at a certain point, and they do have their shine, but they are very much left behind throughout the story, and you're really just following Gallo and Leo, and to a lesser extent Ina and Cray. But I will say I don't think that they had equal weight in the introductions, and that's just also because of the flair that Gallo has. Like his introduction, he's like, and I'm the fucking fire burning heart of a firefighter guy. And then all of the other team members are kind of like scratching their heads like, oh God, not this again. And
yeah, and I guess you always know that the person that everyone's scratching their head over is going to be the one who needs the character arc the most.
Yeah. But his just like introduction and then his flair for the dramatic, I think that put way more weight on him.
Yeah.
Like you could tell that he was going to be the guy.
Do you think he has a character arc?
Yeah, because he does. At the beginning of the movie, he's just like willy-nilly following orders, just like crazy.
But also hot-headed.
Yeah, and hot-headed. Like the hot-headed's still there.
Sure.
But I think he does get a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more like follows his own rules, because he realizes that he'd been duped this whole time by Cray Forsyth, who he looked up to as a hero this whole time. And he find out he was like up to a lot of nefarious things, so that it causes him to be like, oh, I can't just trust anything that's being told to me. I need to think for myself and align myself with the people that I think are like doing good, even if they are labeled as bad people. Like he could distinguish, like even at the pizza parlor, like when Vulcan comes in and he's about to arrest the pizza maker who is a Burnish, he kind of stands up for him like, hey, leave the guy alone. He just made me some dope pizza. But I guess that's kind of the extent of his arc. Could you say that that's a character arc?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly mild, but he definitely changes his mind about what's going on in the world, and he aligns himself with his own ethics.
Yeah.
And I guess he always seems to have this little bit of a rebellious thing going on. So even though he's kind of following the rules, he is doing it in his own way, and they keep being like, don't do it that hard. And he's like, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah, you're just going to waltz right in there and burst down the door, aren't you? And he's like, you know me.
Yeah. But I think he's got this like self-centered, egotistical thing going on in the beginning. And I think throughout he really shows a development of empathy for others, and that starts to inform his ethos way more than being cool.
Yeah, well,
or impressing his hero. I think that's what the arc is for him.
I think that it's like he wants to impress his hero, and then throughout the movie he just becomes a hero himself. Like he doesn't need to follow.
Absolutely.
He doesn't need to follow that guy's footsteps because like he found out that guy is a piece of shit. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to fight for my own ethics, which are, good, I guess.
And I think that, I thought it was kind of random when we first have him developing that empathy with Leo, and he finds the Burnish hiding away in this cave after they've escaped from the big freeze prison or whatever it's called. And there's a girl and she's dying, and he watches like Leo give her mouth to mouth, and it's kind of like this flame reigniting to try and help her. And for a moment it seems to kind of be working, and then she dies anyway. And during that time, Gallo, I don't know, I just forgot his name, but during that time, Gallo's like, I have medical training. I've got stuff on my bike, and he's tied up. But he's like, let me go. I will get my stuff, and I will try and help save her.
Mm-hmm.
And they refuse his offer for that. And then when she dies anyway, I was like, what was the point of that?
That was what I was kind of thinking. I was like, what is it? I was thinking that Gallo was going to see that and be like, oh, Leo's still a bad guy. He just murdered that girl. I could have helped her or something.
Yeah, and I think that's totally how that could have went.
Yeah.
But I think it's literally only to set up their wonderful mouth-to-mouth moment later on.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't make any sense. Like the girl turns to ash, like, and when the Burnish die, they turn to ash. And
I guess it's setting that up too.
Yeah, but like that doesn't really lead to anything. Like that doesn't play a major role in anything. And then when Gallo gives mouth to mouth to Leo, it's like he doesn't have the Burnish power. So
I guess he has like one of the flames from Leo that keeps protecting him.
True.
And he like puts it in his mouth. It's like he puts in a breath mint.
Yeah.
Before kissing him.
Does that thing like in movies? So it's like that breath spray.
Yeah. What is it called? Baca or I don't remember what it's called. Yeah, and I thought like
I completely forgot about that mouth to mouth scene with
I thought like doing the male mouth to mouth and making it this like really beautiful thing and not making this bro like, oh, gross, whatever.
It immediately goes back to that.
That's what it would be in an Avengers movie or whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, like when it's about to happen, like it's not a thought in Gallo's mind. He like has the flame, he puts it in his mouth, and he's like, I'm going to save this fucking guy.
Yeah.
And then they do it, and it's
I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah, it was like, this is heroism. Like this is you being heroic. And then when Leo wakes up, that's when he just like, ew, I wasn't doing it. I'm not gay. You're gay.
Oh yeah, he does. I forgot he does do that. Never mind. And Leo's like, get over yourself.
Yeah, right.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that scene in the cave might have been better if they'd let Gallo go get his medical supplies, and maybe Leo and Gallo worked together to try and save this girl, and then maybe she still died.
Yeah.
But then, you have this first moment where they're trying to work together, and then, leaving him there in the cave and him watching them go off, and, having that first moment of being like, oh, maybe these aren't my enemies.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a better scene. That was the only scene where I was just like, what are you doing?
Yeah, because it only really sets up the mouth-to-mouth thing, but otherwise it's just for Leo to turn around and just be like, us Burnish, when we die, we turn to ash. Isn't that crazy? Gallo's just sitting there tied up like, whoa.
I guess.
Supposedly. I suppose so. But yeah, that scene kind of was like, what is being set up here?
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's like, that was the scene where Gallo was like, what do you even need food for? Do you even eat? And then Leo's like, we're people, dude. Like, yeah, we
don't
eat.
eat, we die. Yeah.
And he's like, oh. Fucking Gallo's just like, oh, I guess they do need food.
Do you have any other like favorite scenes before we kind of wrap this up?
Not really. I mean, I really do love that comedic moment where Gallo is just naming everything. Like when they're in the gigantic mecha things, and he's naming moves, and he's naming the mechas, and he even like named Kray's mecha. Like Kray is just like, I'm just in a giant robot, and he's like, you're Krayzon X, and he's like, you don't get to fucking name my mecha.
That was really funny.
Stop naming my stuff, dude. Like you don't have the agency to do that. I wanted to ask you also, because there is a lot of Greek mythology in this, but there is some Japanese historical context too with the firefighters of old. And that's like a thing that Gallo always brings out, like in the first scene when they're fighting the Mad Burnish, which is Leo's kind of quote unquote terrorist group, he summons a weapon from, I think they're called the Hikashi.
I don't think that's what it's called.
Hikashi?
Yeah.
And it's like they're like a ancient, I don't know ancient, but like a Japanese firefighting team in their history. And I thought that was cool. And then like even in the end when they're fighting Cray in Crazon X, he's like, I wish I had that weapon from the Hikeshi. And then Leo's like, you want one? And he just fucking makes one out of fire. And he's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, a lot of Japanese architecture is using sort of thin wood and paper.
Yeah.
And it's stuff that burns like crazy.
Yeah.
And it's not really a dry place. So it's not like fires would be as frequent as they would be, say, in Southern California, where we are now. But I could see why fire, when it did happen, would be a serious problem in ancient Japan. But, you know, I was noticing how the mecha have those big, almost like horn-like things.
Yeah.
And that reminded me strongly of sort of some of the samurai helmets.
Yeah. That is true.
Because I was thinking like, oh, doesn't Gundam also do that, have that? And I was like, oh, yeah. Because he has that moment where he's like, you know, I'm, you know, summoning the power of the warriors of a Far East island nation.
Yeah.
Not going to mention where, because I don't really know where Promepolis is supposed to be. I don't think it is kind of set in Japan.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But we do see like all these, you know, real places. So as we see scenes in New York, we see scenes in like Tokyo and Paris, San Francisco, I think. And so we don't know where Promepolis is supposed to be. But I think once the whole world has been, half of it's been flamed to death, they just were like, let's restart. Let's start naming stuff again.
I think you'd have to lose so many more people in half the population to start to really restructure things.
Yeah.
Like, I think initially you'd be like, oh, traffic's lighter.
Well, this is kind of nice, actually. Bill Burr has a joke about that. About how, like, you know, if you just let people die, you start to, you know, it's terrible, but lanes just opening up on the highway. So there apparently was a period during the Edo period in Tokyo that there were a lot of fires. And even in the modern days, the old Edo was still remembered as the city of flames, it says on Wikipedia. And the Hikeshi were the people that fought those fires. So it does have a historical significance to Japanese as well.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
God, could you imagine?
Oh, and the weapon that he wants is called a matoi, and the matoi was a flag that was used in the Edo period to notify people of a fire near or within a building.
Oh, that's cool.
There you go.
When he said matoi at first, it just sounded like he was like, I need matoi.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is he saying? And then it was written out and I was like, oh no, that looks like a thing.
Yeah.
It's actually a thing.
Yeah, each different group of firemen in the Edo period had their own matoi to identify themselves. So that's what that was. So there we go. There we go. Oh, we're learning.
Yeah, lots of learning happened.
Some stuff here. Learned a little bit about Greek mythology. We learned a bit about Japanese history. Learned a bit about nuance and ethics and morality. What more can you want from a movie?
It's a great question, Joe.
Best movie ever made.
Should we crank our amps?
Yeah, let's crank our amps. You crank it first.
Okay. I'm going to give Promare an 8.5 out of 11. I love the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes the animation is a little over the top, and I did feel a little beat up,
Yeah.
a little slapped around. There's kind of a sensory overload that goes on that I think you can have moments of, and it works. And I think if it's just too sustained, it's kind of exhausting to look at. And it was such a relief when you had those sort of quiet moments. But I thought the character designs were good. I thought the voice acting was good. I thought it was written really well. I liked that it had these interesting thematic ideas. It had these literary ideas and all these sort of like callbacks to Greek mythology and to Japanese history that give these really interesting talking and thinking points. But it was also a great action film.
Yeah.
and was very action heavy and had robots and explosions and an interesting sort of superhero backstory thing going on. So this ticks a lot of boxes for me. But there's just like, it just misses the mark a little bit on just a couple of points. So I can't say that this is one of those like 9, 10, 11 movies, but just underneath.
Yeah, I was really trying to figure out what to give this, but I think I've settled on a 9.5 just because I liked it a lot. I can't deny that at certain points I did turn to Kat and say, this is so fucking stupid. It is very silly. And there are certain things that I was just like, this is silly. And like, there's a couple of scenes that are like, well, why did that happen? Especially that cave scene where the girl dies. Like, that's still a little confusing to me. And then once they start to explain the interdimensional fire demons with the guy who uploaded his whole consciousness onto a computer, I was like, this is getting a little ridiculous. It felt a little long to me.
Yeah.
It felt a little long. They didn't really do much with the other side characters aside from give them names and then have them be like, we're part of the team and we don't leave a brother behind at the end. But otherwise, like, it's very interesting. It does ask a lot of really good questions. It has a good villain or villains, depending on who you ask or what you see in this movie. And yeah, everything that Kat said that was good, I agree with. And I also agree with the frenetic energy of it is a little much at times. But I don't know. It was just, I thought it was pretty fucking good. Yeah. Not the greatest movie of all time. I've been saying it's the greatest movie of all time, but it's not. We all know that is Ponyo.
But yeah, I probably would recommend this to plenty of people.
Yeah.
To watch. But I'd give them a warning.
Oh yeah, not people prone to seizures.
And I would totally watch it again, but probably not next week.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
I need some time to recover.
I feel like this is in like a Summer Wars area of like the rating system. Like I would say this is like a good comparison, I guess, with Summer Wars.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think Summer Wars I gave more like a 10 or a 10 and a half. It was an almost perfect movie for me.
Yeah.
But absolutely this does have some of those vibes where the thematics are there. There's a fully thought through story. The animation's interesting. And, but I think with Summer Wars, the animation only gets crazy and weird and geometrical when you're in Oz, when you're in the computer world. And then outside of it, it's fairly normal.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like you're constantly in Oz. You're constantly in the world with the craziness.
It is a barrage of craziness.
Yes.
Except for when you're at the lake.
Yeah.
But then even that gets crazy.
And then that eventually does get a little bit crazy.
The virtual computery guy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Anything else to say before we wrap this bad boy up?
Nope.
All right. Well, here come the plugs. Follow us on Instagram at the Anime Movie Podcast if you want to reach out. The Anime Movie Podcast at gmail.com. Follow us on YouTube. We put up the whole episode of the podcast along with some clips that we make. We do some video podcasts as well when we have the time, which is getting less and less these days. But yeah, we got some fun stuff on the YouTube, and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and subscribe and all that jazz. That wraps up our episode on Promare. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Anime Movie Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at the Anime Movie Podcast, and you can reach out via email at theanimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. Please subscribe, rate and review, and tell a friend. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.